I'm going to go out of sub-object mode. I'm just going to select that single railing and move it forward if I can find it. Be a bit temperamental sometimes to try and select a sub-object here. There we go. I'm going to go into a hierarchy and make sure I change my pivot so it's easy for me to move around. I'm just going to move that forward. And that's going to be a single railing piece in case there are any parts inside the building when I'm building it again where I need just a railing section. We're going to export this one as an FBX so we can bring it into Unreal. Call it single rail, small single rail. And again, this goes back to reusing asset pieces to save on memory and poly counts, because we can instance this in the engine, so it's only loaded into memory once and then just instanced around the level for wherever we need it. We're going to do the same with this longer section here at the front. So again, I'm going to go into sub-object mode. I'll probably jump into the top viewport. It may be easier for me to do a selection. Just make sure everything is selected. Again, we're going to do a detach as clone. I'm going to call this one large single rail. Again, I'm going to try here and get Max to select the right one for me. I could do it through here, but it's a little harder to find. There we go. I'm just going to move that forward as well. And we're going to export it again as large single rail. Alright, there's just one more piece here from this that I want to export as an object on its own, and they're one of these columns here in the corner. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go into sub-object and just select those columns. Again, detach as clone. I'm going to call this one single rail COL for column. And again, you see, I'm finding it very hard to select the cloned object here in the viewport. Eventually it will find it, but if I go through my my list of objects here, it may be easier. Okay, I want to make sure that in my hierarchy tab I've moved my pivot to the middle of the object. And we'll move this one out. And we'll export it as well. Alright. Now again, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm making modular pieces of assets that can be reused in the engine for different sections of the building. I know in the back section, in the fly through on the upper floor, when it goes through the wrought iron gates and goes over the edge and goes down, there are railing sections all the way through there. You don't see them a lot during the cinematic, but they're there, and I want to put them in when I rebuild the building. And doing it this way, like I said, allows me to just instance these pieces of geometry and reuse them without using more memory inside Unreal. It keeps, and just having a couple of different sized pieces gives me more options when I want to place them inside the building so that they fit correctly. Like, don't worry about these end pieces, because generally I know from when I built the building, I'm never going to actually, these end pieces are going to be butting into a wall or into a column. So I could take, for instance, this column we've just exported and place it there like that, so that we can end off our piece of geometry and make it look correct. And that's what we'll be doing in Unreal when we rebuild the building. Let's import these into Unreal now. So we're in our models, we'll go import. We'll start with the column, I think. That's all fine. Again, this transform vertex, that I think from memory, I thought that came in ticked. If it's ticked, it'll make sure, it'll bring your objects into the 0, 0 wall space. Unticked, it allows you to keep your axes in the middle of the object. Again, this is that reset X-form thing. Probably not necessary for this small piece of geometry anyway. We do have that problem with the color again. Let's fix that by going into our material and dragging in the proper material. Saving our file. Okay, let's drag that in so that we know it's there. You see the difference here with the offset. This is what I was talking about. That's because of my reset X-form. So let's do that. Let's throw down a reset X-form on our piece of geometry. Collapse our stack. Re-export it again. We'll just re-import it into Unreal, which is really easy. We just right click and go re-import. And you see now that our axis is in the center of our object, which will make moving it around inside the editor when we rebuild the building much easier. Let's just move that off to the side there. Before we re-import the other pieces of geometry, let's do a reset X-form on them to make sure that they're going to be correct. Collapse our stack. Make sure that our axis is in the center. Again, we'll do a reset, do a collapse, and just make sure that our axis is in the middle. Okay, let's re-export these pieces one more time. We're just overwriting the old ones. Back into Unreal, let's re-import those pieces of the geometry. Again, the smoothing group. We don't have any smoothing groups, that's why it's bringing in that message. Now let's make sure we swap out our materials for ones we've already created. That one, this one. Trying to recall what that material is. That is I have to rename these as well to make sure that we know what they are when we're bringing them in. I think that one actually is still in models. I haven't moved it yet. It's this one here. Save the changes we've made. And drag that one in. Let's just rotate it so we can look at the right side of it. There we go. Okay, let's work with the last one now and import the larger section. And we've just got to do the same thing again. We've got to swap out our materials for ones we've already created. So we'll start with that one at the top. Jump into our materials. That one. That one. This one. And that should be it. So save our asset again. Back into our models and drag that new railing section into the level. Again, we're just going to rotate it 90 degrees so we can have a better look at it. And we'll move it over. Move it back a little bit. Okay, so from that one asset now we've created 3 others that we can reuse in the level where we need them, when we need them. Just by duplicating them and saving on polygon counts, memory and all that type of thing, texture. Similar thing that we did here with this texture, that these 5 assets are all using the same texture to save on texture memory. Let's do a save all here so that we don't lose what we've done. Okay, now we can jump back into Max and we can go out of isolation mode. And let's move these assets into the background because we know we've finished working on them. Because remember, as we finish working on an asset, we move it to the back, and that way we know we've done it and we don't have to worry about it. We're getting there. Now this piece here is a good example of what I was talking about before with reusing assets. This piece at the top is reused. Is the same piece reused here at the bottom. So what we're going to do with this piece is we're going to save out just that top piece as one object, and we're going to duplicate it to reuse it down at the bottom of the stairwell. And we will save that out. We can't, actually we probably don't even need to save it out because we've already created that piece of geometry here. That's the one we just imported into Unreal. We can use that when we remake this stairway in Unreal at the top and at the bottom. So all we really have to worry about is the railing section here. And one change I do want to make to this railing is, this is the railing that goes up against the back wall. I do want to add another railing on the actual wall itself, just the top part of the railing, because generally in a stairwell you won't have this railing section copied to the other side if it's up against a wall, but you will have a railing for people to put their hand on as they walk up the stairs. So we'll do that. We'll make that change where we take the railing, we duplicate it. I'll create a couple of supports that sit underneath a bit that are actually attached to the wall that it goes beside. And again, if we jump into the original video here, it's probably easier for me to show you than try and explain what I'm talking about. I'll just play it through from here. And just here, you see this railing here? That stairwell butts up against the wall. There really should be another railing section that runs down that wall for people to put their hand on as they walk up. So I'll probably end up creating that railing and attaching it to the wall. But let's get our textures sorted first, I think. Now, I've just highlighted that section of the railing. I'm going to isolate my selection here and look at the banisters themselves, these banisters here. Now, we've already created the small column, so we know that's done, but we need one that has a base on it like that. So what we can do is we can jump out of isolation mode, look at a piece we've already created, which is over here. Actually, we'll look at this large column. We created one for this large column. And that's this decorative piece here on the bottom. We're going to do the same thing again to save ourselves some work. We've got our object selected. We'll go into sub-object mode. And we're going to select that square base and attach it as a clone. I want to make sure I just get the base. I don't want the rest of it. Okay, detach as clone. We're going to call it SQR base Deco. Never lets me select the object I want. Alright, let's try and find it in here. That's the one we want there. Let's just move that out of the way. Again, we're going to have to make sure our pivot is in the center because we've detached it from a larger object. Let's exit isolation mode and drag that over to where we need it. And jump back into isolation mode again. Okay, this is going to be a little large. We're probably going to have to make it smaller. Yeah, you see, it's way too big at the moment. We can just do a uniform scale. Should be good, I think, for what we want. Now, what we can do here is if we think we're going to be reusing this square base in other parts of the model, we can certainly save that out and bring it into Unreal on its own. But I think what I'll end up doing is I'm actually going to save that out with the top piece here, even though we've already created that top column on its own. I'm just trying to decide what's the better way to do it. Let's just jump into our side view here. Now, we've already created this top column. My only concern with that is that this column may be a little larger, which we could by all means scale up in Unreal. That's not really a problem. We may do that. I think that it's a better example too for you guys as to what I mean by reusing your geometry and why you should. Okay, we've made our base piece here that goes under the column for this side stairwell. We've sized it correctly. We don't really have to worry about placement too much because we're going to do it in Unreal. Let's rename this. Well, it's called Square Base Deco. We'll leave it as that. Our pivot is in the center. We just want to make sure we do another reset on the X-form. Again, we're going to collapse the stack. Let's export this piece of geometry. We'll just call it Square Base Deco. Jump into Unreal and we'll import that. Okay, I think we're just going to have to swap out our texture map here for one we've already made because we don't want to create a new material that we don't when we already have one made. It's going to be this one here. Save that. Back into our building. Alright, now let's create a blueprint. Let's drag up that asset that we've just exported, which is a base piece. Alright, let's drag in another one of these column pieces. Doing this in the front left, doing it in orthographic here is probably more difficult than jumping in and doing it from the top viewport, which I may actually do. It might be easier. Just to make sure they're lined up correctly. We have snap turned on, so they should line up automatically on their own. If you've got grid snap turned on. Back into our orthographic, and as far as the height goes, I just want to make sure it's positioned correctly on top of the column. That looks good. I'm going to select, I'm going to undo that move. I'm holding down the control key to select both of those objects. I'm going to go up to my blueprints and I'm going to convert selected components to a blueprint class. I'm going to tell it where I want it to put that blueprint, which is in a blueprints folder I've created. And we're going to call this one, we'll call this one backstair columns, or backstair column underscore prefab. That way I know it's a blueprint and a prefab, pre-made object. So now that's created a blueprint of that, those two objects together. So whenever I want to add another one of those, so you can see in my blueprints here, I know it's a little hard because I'm in the way. It's created our blueprint, so I don't have to jump into my building, drag out the single column and drag out the base and put them together again. I can just go into my blueprints, drag out that pre-made object and place it in my level. It just makes it easier. So blueprints can be used, they don't always have to be used for programming or movement of an object. You can use them just as to create a prefab. Okay. So let's make sure we save all again. We'll jump back into Unreal, back into Max, sorry. Now let's look at our stairwell here. Now we know that we've got our blueprint created for the top column, and we're going to use the same blueprint for the bottom column. So all we really need to worry about now is the actual railing center section itself. So I'm going to detach these pieces of geometry. In fact, instead of detaching them, I don't need them now, I'm going to delete them. I'm just going to move that one out of the way, in the background here. So we can concentrate just on the railing section itself. And now again, these railings, we only see from this side here. There's a wall that goes down here that butts up against that base, I think. No, that's hanging over, but we only see that side. This side here, we have stairs that run up, right up to the edge there, which is why you see that the texture on this side is a little different. Again, that's been done so that it's easier for me to see which side faces out and which side is going to be covered up. So we're going to get stairs that run right up to that bottom runner. So we never see any of that. This is the only side we see when we're inside the actual building. But we do want to add some detailing here, and we do want to change out these railing sections for the higher poly version we created, the more detailed version anyway. What we need to do first is separate the railings from the railing and the runner from the rest of the stairs, because we're going to be texturing that up separately inside of Substance Painter, like we did with the mezzanine rail section. So we're going to detach it, but we don't want to detach as a clone, just do a normal detach. We're going to call this back rail runners. Alright, I'm also going to detach the old versions of these railings. I'm detaching them but not deleting them because I want to place the new ones in the same spot, so I'm just going to call it old rails. So now we have our runner, our decorative piece here at the base. We've got our runner and our rail, and we've got our railing sections here in the middle. I'm going to go out of isolation mode. And now I want to copy one of the railings we've already made. Again, sub-object mode. Select one of these railing sections. And we're going to detach it as a clone. Let's call it S rail for single rail. I'll select it here in my browser. Again, I'm going to make sure that my pivot position is centered to the object. I'll drag it out. Alright, let's just select the railings. That's the only part we're worried about at the moment, and go into isolation mode. We'll jump into our side viewport here, and we're going to move our railings into position. Now this one is a little shorter, and it really shouldn't be, so I'm actually going to, the railings I'm just trying to work out whether the railings, the railings should probably be the same height as all the other pieces, so we're going to shorten the actual railing itself as well. I'm just thinking that they may be a little higher though, because the rails actually butt up against. No, they'll be the same size. We can always change them if we find that they're too short later on. I'm just going to make sure it's in the right position here. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to make them around about the middle of where the old ones were, as far as the position goes. I'll hold down the shift key and shift drag a copy. Before I do that, I want to make sure that the rotation on this is correct. I think it actually is. I think the old railings were actually all... that's correct. Again, you know, when I was creating the garden terrace and I was saying to you guys, when you make these, a lot of people like to use an array to do this, where you'll get everything in completely identical spot, distance, rotation, all that type of thing. An array is good to do your initial layout, but you should always go through and make just a couple of small changes to the rotation of a couple of objects, because nothing man-made is ever going to be completely perfect. And a computer-generated program like Max or any 3D program, when you're using an array, is going to make things perfect, which is not natural. To get a more natural look to an object, it's always better to add a bit of imperfection. And we're going to be doing that here with these railings. I'm going to shift drag a copy, and I'm going to position them all first, and then I'm going to come back and make a couple of alterations. Always make a copy, and again I'm placing them around about the middle. And the alterations, you don't make big changes, but just small alterations here and there to either the rotation or the position. Okay, now we have them positioned where the old ones were. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete the old versions and look at our railings as they are. Now, I do want to make sure that the position between each one is similar, but if there's a couple of that are not exactly the same, that's actually better because it makes it look a little bit more man-made. And this is what I mean by not making sure everything is exactly the same. Don't go too far out though, otherwise it will look odd. And doing it by hand, you're going to get a more realistic look than using an array to make sure they're all exactly identical, as far as spaced apart identically. And the same thing goes here for the rotation. On a couple of them, I'm just going to slightly rotate them so they're not completely straight. Not by much, just by a very little bit. You don't want to go rotating it so it's like that. That's not right. Not unless you want it to look damaged. You just want to rotate it so it's not completely straight like all of them are. Just here and there. And even though it's hard to see complete like that, because they are all a little bit different, a little bit unique, and a couple of them aren't completely straight, it makes it just look a bit more natural, a bit more realistic. Okay, now we can exit isolation mode. And we'll continue on with this, I think, next week, guys. I think I might leave it there for today. Save my file. I do want to thank you guys very much for hanging out and watching. I will be back on again on Monday next week at 5 p.m. Pacific time in the United States. I do post 15 minutes before I go live to my Twitter page at PhilDoes3D if you're not sure. But my schedule does not change. It's always Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time in the US. So I will be back on again next week on Monday. I do want to thank you guys again for hanging out and for watching. I do appreciate it, guys. Hopefully I'll see you guys next week. You guys have a great weekend. I may get to watch a couple of movies this weekend. We'll see how we go. And I'll be back again on Monday next week. Take care, guys.